Going Beyond is a presentation of Beyond Housing, helping entire communities become better places to live with RareGem Productions. Reliance Bank, your locally owned hometown bank, is pleased to sponsor today's Going Beyond radio show. With 20 locations throughout the St. Louis area, Reliance Bank is making money a little friendlier.
Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
We're going beyond.
Today on Going Beyond.
Welcome to this edition of Going Beyond. I'm your host, Chris Krehmeyer, President and CEO of Beyond Housing. And on today's show, we're going to talk about, kind of what happens next in and around Ferguson as it relates to the folks that live there and what we collectively as a community are looking to do. Joining me on today's show is someone who stepped up early, someone who's been in this space for a long time, and a lot of times we don't hear names of folks who've been doing this work, not to be in the limelight, but to do the work because it's their calling. Joining me on today's show is pastor at Christ the King UCC Church in North County, Reverend Traci Blackmon. Reverend Blackmon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So give a sense of to our listeners kind of what you're thinking right now. What are the things that you are focusing on? There's a lot of conversations and a lot of things going on. Can you give our listeners kind of where you're at today and where you're trying to focus your time and energy?
Well, I've made a transition in my efforts in this case in particular. I'm moving more to holding a space for the people who are directly impacted by the tragedy that happened to the Brown family with the killing of Michael Brown as the continuation of that pursuit of justice continues. I'm trying to focus more on the residents and the community that are directly impacted. I think that many times in cases like this, the attention is needed and is warranted, and I certainly have been on the front lines of trying to help with that as well. But now there is a neighborhood of people who live in those apartments who could have been living anywhere else, but by fortune we're just in that place at that particular time. And I think it's important that those of us who have any level of privilege in this situation, any level of access in this situation, began to hold open space for their voices to be heard. So when people are at tables deciding what needs to be next for the community, those who are actually living this story, not vicariously, but living it actually, their voices need to be heard. And so I started a couple of efforts in that regard with the permission of the residents over there. We've begun meeting. Some of the parents have begun meeting with me to form a loosely formed, I don't want to say neighborhood association because we're talking about an apartment complex, and so we don't have a name for it yet, but it will have a structure somewhat like a neighborhood association so that members of that neighborhood may become courageous enough, for lack of a better word, and supported enough to speak their truth at tables where people are trying to decide what needs to happen and what has been happening in places like Canfield, all over St. Louis. And so I'm strengthened and I'm encouraged by that. And I'm finding out through those interactions that there are several efforts like that happening. For instance, there is a group that lives in Canfield that they're forming their own neighborhood watch type of association so that they can watch out for themselves, watch out for each other, to try to make sure that this doesn't happen again, not just with the police, but with any violence in their neighborhood. And I think that's very encouraging. And then you have, like I said, these neighbors that want to come together to form an association so that they can support one another. Because some of the stories that did not get reported in the media that happened is when all of the unrest erupted in that neighborhood, then the buses stopped running. And when the buses stopped running during the week, then people who had jobs and required the bus for transportation weren't able to get to work. So there are several people in that apartment complex who lost their jobs as a result of not being able to get to work. you lose your job, you lose your income source. And so that causes problems in terms of being able to pay your bills on time and securing that you're going to have somewhere to live as this continues. I was out there yesterday with some of the residents and noticed things just as simple as people making homemade signs reminding people that this is a residence and that while the viewing of the memorial that has been placed for Mike Brown is certainly important, and it's in a powerful place, that the speed with which we go through that apartment complex needs to be monitored because there are lots of children there. And so residents have begun making posters with their own version of slow down because children are playing, or slow down, children are crossing, in an effort to try to come together as a neighborhood and put things right. Sunday, some of the mothers asked me to come over with a few people who believe in prayer, and I did so with an interfaith group. And we just gathered in the green grass over there and began to tell the stories and tell the pressures that people were under, tell the issues that had people worried, and cry together and mourn, something that has not been able to happen because of all the media that descended and all the people who mean well and who are doing good things, but who sometimes prohibit those who live there from being able to carry on their daily functions of life. And that was very helpful as well. I met a mother just this week in having those kind of conversations who was concerned because she was in the middle of a custody battle, and now to live in a place that has been portrayed by the media as something it is not. It is not some horrible place that's in need of saving. It's not a violent neighborhood. It's something that could have happened anywhere and happened to happen in Canfield Apartments. And her fear and her concern that this would become a part of that custody case as reasons why it might be safer for her children to be somewhere else. These are real issues that people are dealing with. And Chris, I've been thinking, and I've certainly been a part of many of the protests that have happened. I certainly want justice for Mike Brown, but it's been 14 days now, and while we need to continue to protest, we need to continue to keep the pressure up, perhaps thinking about other places that we need to protest and other ways that we need to protest, because, how would you like to wake up on a Saturday morning or on a Friday morning or any other morning and your entire lawn and your parking lots are covered with people who are there for a good reason but prohibit your ability to move freely in and out of your residence? So it's something we have to work out together, recognizing that we're all trying to do the right thing, but my focus is really becoming on creating space for those in Canfield to have a voice in what is happening in their neighborhood and in their surroundings.
So one of the great words you used early on was permission.
Yes.
And
yes.
Talk to me about why that was important for you to one, ask for that and then to receive it before you move forward.
Well, because if you don't involve people in even your pursuits for justice on their behalf, then you really have become another entity that is removing their voice from the public square, right? So they live there. This is their reality in ways that it is not my reality. So it's very important that at this point we begin to ask their permission to do things on their behalf and to do things. I don't know how else to put that.
No, again, it's a tenet under which Beyond Housing we believe in this kind of this continuous and virtuous circle of ask, align, and act. And ask is you ask folks that you're attempting to serve what's important, what's needed, what's necessary, what are the challenges, what are the solutions. And then with them together, align the resources to, address those issues that they believe are important to them. So again, I appreciate the cognizance in how you're thinking about the work to recognize that well-intentioned people can roll up and want to help for all the right reasons, but in this case, you can't lose sight of the folks who live in Canfield, who have been affected by this in a lot different ways than other folks. So again, I think that idea of permission and again the way we talk about it, the ask part of our work is don't have so much hubris that you know everything and you're going to roll in because you've seen the news reports and you know what to do, versus asking people who have their lived experience that's different than yours, because unless you live there and walk in somebody's shoes, you can't categorically know what they're thinking or what's most important to them.
Exactly, and it's a partnership, right? So we're coming in from Florissant and from other areas in St. Louis and even from other areas in the nation. And it's not that I've heard from any resident over there that they don't want justice or they don't see this as their fight. That's not what I'm saying at all. Everyone is on the same page with that. But it's about a partnership. It's about respecting the fact that this is also where they live and where they're raising their children. And also respecting the fact that the death of Michael Brown was the catalyst to push this into national spotlight. But the issues that it unearths are long-standing issues. And so people have reactions and responses to those from different places. There are certainly other young men in Canfield and young women as well who have experienced less than pleasant encounters with law enforcement.
So Tracy, when you think about that, and particularly as it relates to kind of the issues of race and perceptions of the challenges, what I've tried to share with particularly a lot of either white friends or coworkers or just people I know who know what I do for a living and know that I've done this for many years is it is really difficult to say, look, unless you have lived through this experience of the challenges of being discriminated against randomly for no reason, and the frustration that you have to live through, you don't understand really what it's like, right? You can be empathetic, you can be understanding as best you can, but it's really hard to really get your mind around the weight of that on your shoulders and what that does. And when you have a flashpoint, again, like this tragedy with Michael Brown, then this is what it brings to the surface, and it's not just solely the terrible thing that happened to Michael Brown. It's a culmination of a lot of things, including what happened to Michael Brown.
Yes, absolutely. One of the mothers on Sunday evening was sharing with me, with tears in her eyes, that she has 4 boys, and they're younger boys, and so a policeman was driving through the neighborhood earlier on Sunday, not doing anything, just a police car going through the neighborhood, and her son ran off of the grass up to the porch and dropped on his knees and lifted his hands up. And she was talking about what it means to try to raise children in a society where they feel that they have to do that. Now, I don't know, clearly that could not have only been because of the police encounter. It could also be from what has been on the media. It can also be from the protest and the shouts from the protest and what he, in his 6-year-old mind, has interpreted that to mean. But it's a reality that those who are raising African-American boys, and I've raised 2 myself, we have different fears and different concerns for our children as they reach their teenage years, as they enter into adolescence. It's not just about pimples for us. It's about having conversations about how you interact if you're stopped by law enforcement, not certainly meaning that all law enforcement is bad. I don't even think most law enforcement is bad, actually. But these encounters happen on a frequent enough basis for our black men that we have to prepare our children for that. And if you don't have to live in that manner, it is difficult for you to understand where all of this anger and all of this rage would come from.
So one of the things I've been telling folks is, I have a 19-year-old son. He's my middle one. I did not have any reaction to what happened with Michael Brown relative to, that could have been my son, right?
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
I didn't. That thought didn't enter my mind. Right. And I know that is the exact opposite of so many African American parents who raise their kids today, particularly their boys. Right. If they have to have the talk. Right. Here's how you have to navigate the world simply because of the way that you look. No other reason. Right. Simply because of the way that you look. And again, I try to get people to understand. Think about the weight of that on your shoulders every day. And how weary that would get, and how tiresome of, I'm looked at differently, not because of the content of my character, but simply the color of my skin and my gender, right? And how aggravating that would be, and how frustrating that would be. Look, I know my 19-year-old son, he would not be good because he has a little bit of a temper. So again, I try to let folks understand as we have this conversation. We need to understand that we're going to have to do a significantly better job at coming together and having uncomfortable conversations about somebody else's lived experience, and again try to be empathetic and understanding that if we don't truly begin to understand where someone else is coming from, that we've not learned anything from this terrible tragedy. If we've not come together to say, I need to understand what a police officer thinks about every day when they go out, and it's a stressful job, and there are bad people in the world that they come into contact with. And we also need to understand what's it like every day to come out of your house knowing that you're a suspect, no matter what. And how do we talk to each other about both those two experiences that are difficult and that are hard? And unless we start building those relationships, which will take time. And again, I hope we have the commitment and the patience as a region and as a country to commit to these long-term conversations, to try to understand each other better than we do today, to try to build relationships where it's not simply one of fear, trepidation, and anger, but it's one of I understand a little bit better, and I know that person, right? I know their family. I know what they're doing every day. I know the challenges that they face. If we can't get to that, then sadly we will have another tragedy, and we will have Michael Brown's life and death be in vain if we can't commit ourselves collectively as a region to those difficult and uncomfortable long-term conversations.
And Chris, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm in an additional place to that right now, though, because I recognize that what we're talking about as a long-term goal is changing perceptions and changing hearts and changing beliefs. And it plays out on both sides, right? So if you've never had to live that experience that you just described, then it is difficult for you also to understand the suspicion of law enforcement or the way that African Americans are likely to believe right away that this is possible, that law enforcement would act in a way that is not just and that is not fair and that is not equitable.
Wonderful. Reverend Traci Blackmon, pastor at Christ the King UCC, thank you so much for your voice, for your leadership, and giving folks a way to get plugged in a way that hopefully will lead to long-lasting change. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Chris.
Reliance Bank is pleased to sponsor today's Going Beyond radio show. With 20 locations throughout the St. Louis area, Reliance Bank, your locally owned hometown bank, is making money a little friendlier.
Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
We're going beyond.
Going Beyond is a presentation of Beyond Housing, helping entire communities become better places to live with RareGem Productions. Proudly promoting, presenting, and producing positive programming.
Neighborhood is where you live, and we want to keep it strong and vibrant. This is Chris Krehmeyer with Beyond Housing. We are going beyond.
Chris Krehmeyer, President and CEO of Beyond Housing. Located at 4156 Manchester, phone number 314-533-0600. The only organization in the St. Louis region that offers access to affordable housing. Wherever we work, our goal is to help transform people, families, and communities so that they achieve the skills, strategies, resources, and commitment to succeed for the long term. See our work at beyondhousing.org. Podcast for Going Beyond can be heard, downloaded, and shared by visiting hallelujah1600.com. Listed under the music tab on demand. Going Beyond is another positive production of RareGem Productions.